Hi, everybody, and welcome to Exegetically Speaking, a podcast of the friends and faculty of Wheaton College, Wheaton, Illinois, and the Lanier Theological Library in Houston, Texas. My name is David Capes, and I am the Senior Research Fellow at the Lanier Theological Library and a former dean up there in Wheaton at the School of Biblical and Theological Studies. Our purpose in these podcasts is really very simple. We want to promote the study of biblical languages, Greek, Hebrew, Aramaic, so we can read the Bible more faithfully, study it more fully, and not just read it, but to live it. Joining us today on Exegetically Speaking is Dr. Alexander Loney, who is Associate Professor of Classical Languages here at Wheaton College. He teaches Greek as well as Latin, and so we're going to have a little bit of Latin today mixed in with our Greek, which is a little bit of fun. Alex, good to see you again.
Yes, thank you, David.
It's been a while since I've been on campus, and it's been a while since you've been on campus. A lot of people were, during the COVID year, they were working from home.
Yeah, that's right. That was a challenge, but it's good to be back.
Yeah, it's good to be back for your kids back in school, and it's good to be back here on campus here at Wheaton College. All right, we're going to talk about the Lord's Prayer, particularly verse 11 of Matthew chapter 6, which is, as you called it earlier, the fourth petition. Give us a little background. What are we reading here? Let's talk a little bit about that text.
Well, you may know this in the English as "Give us this day our daily bread," or in Greek, "Ton arton hemon, ton epiousian dos he min semeron." Now,
sounds better when you say it than I say it. Yeah.
Well, there's one word in there which maybe you pass over a little bit when you hear it in translation. Daily, as it's usually translated. In the Greek, epiousian, which is really quite unique.
It's a word that doesn't occur in the New Testament except in the prayer, right?
That's right. Here and in Luke's version as well, in both. It actually doesn't occur anywhere else in Greek as far as we know before this. And basically everywhere else seems like it's in reference to this.
So there's no analog. We can't look to say, okay, well, Plato uses it this way, and then Aristotle, and then it's found this way in the Septuagint. You can't find any analogs to it.
No, that's right. That's right. You can't find anything. In fact, the best way to approach it then is to look at that kind of a word and just see if we can kind of pull apart its pieces and just see what it seems to be constructed of.
So what are some of the interpretive possibilities there?
Well, so if we take its pieces, there you have this preverb, epi, and then you have the rest of the word, ousion, which looks like it comes from the verb or a form of the verb to be, Amy. So you've got something like epi to mean maybe for, and then ousia, which has to do with existence or being. So one option then is a meaning that could mean something that is necessary for existence, maybe what you need for each day. And that seems to be what the English translation, which I think was introduced by Tyndale, that we use today, seems to be getting at.
So when it says daily bread or bread for each day, that's kind of what that refers to, epiousion, for each day or for the day. Or
Yes.
for one's existence.
For one's existence, what you need today.
For substance, something like that.
Yeah, that's right. Another option would be epi more in the sense of on top of or over plus existence. This might be a little bit of a stretch, just in my judgment, but it was an interpretation entertained by some ancient authors as well as some modern commentators. And then that meaning seems to be something like it would be bread that's over or on top of, in addition to, everyday existence or normal material. So then it's some kind of special sort of bread, perhaps sacramental. And so then you get a sense that it has something to do perhaps with the Eucharist. That's right, yeah. And perhaps a reference to our need for Christ himself each day. That today we need Christ.
Interesting. Okay. Any other interpretive possibilities there?
Well, I would entertain a third, but we're going to take a little detour over to the Latin first. Because it's interesting to note that Jerome knew of both of those kinds of interpretations. Now, Jerome translated the New Testament into Latin from Greek. And when he did so, in one place in Matthew, he used the phrase panem supersubstantialem.
Okay, you're going to have to parse that and tell us what that means.
All right, panem is bread, panis. Okay. And then supersubstantialem, I think, means very much on top of the being or substance. So it looks like what we would call a calque translation. That is a translation where you're just doing a very literal kind of translation of the parts of one language into another. And he was aware also of another kind of translation for this passage, panem quotidianum, that is the everyday bread. So those two meanings would map onto the two we talked about
a moment ago.
Yeah. So it looks like actually the quotidianum translation was an older one that he inherited, and he seems to have gone back to the Greek and decided that the supersubstantialem was the better translation.
So the older Latin translations were that second version.
Yes.
That he had seen maybe somewhere before, and he said, I'm not really too happy with that. Let's try something else.
Yeah, let's try this one that emphasizes the perhaps mystical quality or the Eucharistic quality of the bread in the petition.
So at the end of the day, we've given a couple of options. You talked about how Latin, and maybe Latin has something to teach us at that point. Yeah. At least at that point in church history, they're dealing with it in these two different ways, I suppose, and one as a kind of a Eucharistic reading and the other more of a daily bread, that which I need for today, that which provides my substance for today kind of stuff. So at the end of all this, how would you have us and think we ought to be reading it?
Well, David, I think that I like that you brought up the idea that, Latin can teach us these things, because it's very important, I think, to go back and try to figure out how people who are closer to the language and the culture at the time understood this language. And you can see that through how they translated it. That's a very powerful way to do it. I would say that there is a third interpretation, which Jerome didn't entertain, that I think actually has a lot going for it.
Okay.
So this would be epi again, meaning sort of like on top of or coming perhaps. And then the meaning of the ousia would derive from a different verb, eimi, to go, which Greek students can get confused with the other eimi, which means to be.
Right, exactly, yeah.
This eimi, to go, often has a sense of time to it, of coming, of just as we say in English, you can use a word like going to have a future sense to it, to make a future verb out of the word to go.
Right.
I am going to go to the store.
Right, yeah.
So anyway, this interpretation that I'm offering, and I'm not the only one to say this, it has perhaps the bulk of modern interpreters behind this interpretation, would suggest that it actually has a kind of focus on this bread as bread that is coming, or bread that is of tomorrow or of the future, and that the prayer that Jesus invites us to pray is to request that that bread that would come in the future would come for us today. And so it then becomes analogous to the way that the second and third petitions, that the kingdom would come.
The kingdom would come today.
Today.
Or now.
Yeah. As it is in heaven, so that you want this heavenly, the kingdom of heaven, to come to us today. Have this future kind of glorious reality that Christ is inviting us to participate in, to come and enjoy that today.
Yeah, some would call that a realized eschatology, I guess, in a way. But that the bread that is to come would be ours today, in a way.
Yes. I think that's
kind of an interesting way of looking at it. Well, I mean, when you deal with a word, Dr. Loney, that is so uncommon that it really just doesn't occur, you're left to some imaginings, but informed imaginings from other languages at the time. And I think you've helped us kind of parse a little bit of that out today.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for being with us today on Exegetically Speaking.
This was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks to Ian Rosine, Rebecca Larson, and Silvio Vasquez, who help us produce this podcast. Thanks as well to John Lansma, our Wheaton-based director, who makes this podcast possible. We're grateful to Phil Keggy for our music. If you want to study biblical languages, then you need to consider Wheaton College. Whether you're an undergraduate or a graduate student, we have amazing programs, our first-rate faculty, and some of the best students in the world. So go to the website, www.wheaton.edu, and look for modern and classical languages. Get started today. If you have questions about this or any of our podcasts, we'd love to hear from you. If you have suggestions or questions about any passage in the Hebrew Bible or Greek New Testament, send us an email and we'll see if we can get one of our experts to weigh in on that for you. Our email is exegetically.speaking@wheaton.edu. That's exegetically.speaking@wheaton.edu. Thanks for listening.